Guard Your Grill Boxing, Berto Flack, Coltrane. We got another big fight on our hands. This is we've been saying it practically the whole year, man. This has been one of the best years in boxing as it
Facts.
concerns just the fights we've been asking for, man. And now, granted, we didn't ask for this particular fight. We were kind of given it, or we were given the fight, so to speak, out of nowhere. But we are going to see. I want to say a fight that should have happened maybe some time ago, but we're getting it now. Canelo Alvarez against Jermell Charlo, as what they're painting as undisputed versus undisputed. We'll talk about that real quick. At the end of the show, but lots to discuss, man. I mean, we're at the end of the year. There's still fights on the horizon. I mean, there's some. I'll go through real quick some of the fights that are, I think, going to be announced pretty soon. We were talking Boo Boo and David Benavidez seemingly have this like Friday after Thanksgiving date as what we're making this recording right now. It's not solidified. Real quick, your take on that fight. Two guys that had been gunning for Canelo now fighting each other.
Yeah, it's it's interesting that all the pieces are starting to come together. You do wonder and question is like, is it too late, too soon? I mean, too little, too late. But it's a fight that you got to give Benavidez his props because look, Bubu's not an easy guy to look good against. Former, like you said, former junior middleweight. It's funny because all these guys was once upon a time at 154. The Charlo twins, Canelo, J-Rock, Boo Boo. They was all Jerry Hurd. Remember at one time that was
right.
not big. So. But here we are. He's moved up. He's fighting at super middleweight now. Obviously, now correct me if I'm wrong. Was his last fight at super middleweight? Was at middleweight?
Yeah.
It was the super
middleweight. Super middleweight.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all right. So Boo Boo's he's a full fledged super middleweight now. He's not a little dude. Always had nice size on him and a tricky, slick style. Like I said, not the easiest guy to look good against. And look, for Benavidez, this is the second slick fighter that he's fought back to back. So you got to give him props on that. So that go to show you that they're not playing around with, moving him along and, getting him ready for who. But, that still remains to be seen if that fight ever will materialize. But I like it. It's a weird day of the week that is on, Good Friday. I mean, Black Friday. The day after Thanksgiving here in the States is a big shopping day, big college football day. A lot of the positioning going on for bowl games, start to happen at the end of the year. So it's like, it's an interesting day, but of course, we're going to watch it. But look, this is the year, man. Like, we just continue to get these big fights. And, I'm not complaining about it. I'm going to take it, and to your point, Roberto, September 29th, 30th, rather, is the gateway to a lot of stuff, including that fight.
Right. A gateway to potential, what 2024 could present us, man.
That's a big Canelo and Jermell Charlo is a huge fight for other fights.
Right.
It's connected to so much.
We always talk about the ripple in the pond, and it's interesting how this one fight, you brought it up, how this one fight is really like the ripple in the pond for like all these other divisions. And
only on 135.
Right.
Yeah, because look, think about it. Like, one of the things that you can never say never in boxing. You don't know what could happen because at one time they was talking about Gervonta potentially fighting, but not that that's going to happen, but the fact that it's a conversation, that's a division way that way. So it's like it's Legos, all these parts connecting to one another.
Right. No, that's a good point, man. I seldom remember a time in boxing where we've seen that that separation in divisions. There's these little moving pieces that could potentially happen, but It's I think with this fight with Canelo and Jermell, and we'll talk about it, like
Yeah,
obviously
of
the
course,
breakdown
of
of it.
course.
But I think there's a story to be told there. As what I've been saying for some time, man, is really just where this fight I think is going to tell us in some essence where Canelo is. Because I've been very adamant about just where I feel he's at in his career. And the narrative right now is, he had a hand injury, that's why he hasn't looked the same. But we also look at the hood underneath and
Yeah,
what that motor's looking like, man.
right.
It's hard to ignore that. But we'll touch on that in a second. But like another fight too, you got announced, and well, you know what? Before I get to the other fight that got announced, there's December 9th, Regis and Devin Haney. I'm looking forward to that.
Wait, what
But
more? What,
we did a show,
okay.
right, talking about one particular fight that since we did that show is not happening. And I don't want to get too much into it because there's still pieces to the story that we don't have fully solidified. But this
Oh yeah.
Shakur
I
Stevenson,
was like, wait,
Frank
what fight
Martin
is
fight
that?
that we were going to get,
Right.
so apparently is not happening. Um, what was I mean? We all know kind of the ins and outs of like what happened, so to speak, but we saw there's another fight on the horizon, or at least the I don't want to say a feeling, but I guess like the the fight that now we're going to get is Shakur Stevenson and Edwin De Los Santos. But let me ask you, man, in this situation, like where does Frank Martin go? I mean, like, we're hearing rumors about some issues in management or promotions. I mean, I'm not gonna jump into it yet, but
Yeah.
how do you feel, or I should ask, like, what's the best course of action for Frank Martin right now in the case where you had a big fight in front of you and now it's just you know non-existent at this point.
Well, being as though these titles are going to be relinquished, right, from Devin Haney, all of them. I think the WBA. I think Gervonta's fighting for that when he fights. I Pitbull Cruz.
Yeah, if that
Is that what
happened,
they
yeah,
call
like that's
it?
still another question mark, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what they're saying. Well, that's the one
Right.
fight that you know. Initially I thought Frank Martin would be an opponent for Javante, but it don't look like they're going that route. It looks like they're going to end the year with more of a sure shot with Pitbull Cruz. Not that Javante can't beat Frank Martin, but I think that fight is a fight that they want to kind of marinate for later.
Yeah.
So anyway, to answer your question, I think that Frank, probably needs to get himself in position to get a title. First and foremost, fight for one of these vacant titles. Who would that be against? I have no idea. Somebody brought up Chris Colbert name to me. You remember they had some
Yeah,
you know,
he was being mentioned, the fight tanked.
he was being mentioned there. I think that he's going to need a guy of that caliber to get one of these vacant titles, continue to put his name in position to be in position, and then kind of go from there. Like he just some PR damage. Not that he like you said, we don't really know all what took place. We only hearing one side of a story from Shakur's side, and we never really heard from Frank Martin other than a tweet or a thread, whatever the hell they call it now.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right.
Uh, him basically saying, I didn't duck anybody, whatever. I forget. I'm paraphrasing, but I just think that it's some PR stuff that needs to be done. And look, man, these titles will be out here. These belts are all over the place now, and get yourself in position. And then hit the reset button and try to get one of these fights later again. Maybe percentage wise, he'll be able to get more than what he was looking for, and then kind of go from there. So,
Right.
but I don't know, man. It's boxing. It doesn't surprise me. It's not
It
like
doesn't
anything that happened
surprise you.
before, But guys have backed out of kind of fights before, so
Yeah.
we'll see what happens.
Um. Yeah, I guess we'll see. That I mean, as far as we know, Shakur has a fight. on November 16th.
Technically, I think that's a better fight for Shakur. I think that skill wise, I think that he might be a little bit more of a complete fighter, than Frank Martin. Even though he's younger, but just a little bit more polished.
He,
So
he's a bigger guy, like
he's a
than
bigger guy. He's a punch. Look, you to be a great fighter, you have to fight these type of guys. I know the fans wanted Frank Martin because he's the more known guy, but this guy here, De La Santos, is a puncher boxer, which is
yeah,
not the easiest style to deal with. So Shakur has had a fight in the past where he fought an awkward guy, didn't let his hands go as much, and Shakur said it himself. So high as we all are on Shakur, and I think that we all collectively think he's going to beat De La Santos, but at the same time, you got to fight these type guys to see.
right.
You know,
You can't say here's yeah. You're
anything can
absolutely
happen.
right. So
I think it's a good
I guess
fight
we'll.
for Shakur.
No,
Yeah.
it is, man. It'll be on ESPN. We haven't heard
Look,
the
I understand.
official word, but I'm sure we're gonna hear something like really soon.
Look, it's you,
Um,
man. Hold on, real quick, but we got this. You and I got to the joke, right? And 'cause somebody was like, "Oh, look, it's across the street fight," with PBC and Top Rank. And I remember before I said, "Well, this is kind of like the concession stand guys, doing business
yeah,
with the concession stand guys." And I'm not trying to take a shot at De La Santos, but this wasn't really that complicated of a fight to do because that
yeah,
guy probably would have took $50,000 to fight Shakur. You know what I'm saying? So it's like this is not exactly a good example to use for
right.
sides of the street talk. For this particular fight because
No, I agree. I agree.
he's a PBC fighter for those who don't know, and
Right,
Shakur is with Top Rank. So
right.
I had to put that out there,
Before we get into the whole, obviously the preview and breakdown of Canelo and Jermell,
right.
it's funny. I'm looking at that poster behind you. One of the legendary fights,
Yeah.
that we still talk about today, man. Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, and funny enough, when that fight is when you mention those two names, a lot is mentioned more so of the rematch than of the first fight because of
Crazy,
catchphrase
right?
that came out of it, and
Yeah.
so to kind of segue into the new kind of I guess it's the news that broke somewhat this week or earlier or maybe the week a little bit of the week before, but we're hearing more of it now. This whole rematch clause that is coming off of Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence. Errol Spence is exercising the rematch clause, and slowly but surely, Terrence Crawford comes out and says, "Well, we're going to do this rematch. It has to be at 147." And which has people up in arms. Like, why you said 154 and all this stuff. And now more is coming out of the contract. There's concerns that if the participants are not agreeing, where at least in this case, Earl Spence does not agree to the weight, he has to put it in writing of such. Not sure what that really means at the end of the day, but you and I have collectively, from with the inception of the talks of this rematch, um, you and I like look at the economics of things. A lot of the times, we're when we kind of pinpoint certain fights make sense to happen, certain fights just don't. And the one thing that stuck about this fight, man, was number one how it culminated, and it did good business. But there's certain fights that deem it to do that much more business because it fits a certain criteria. Like we always mention, controversial decisions. It was a damn good fight, the first fight. And then collectively could have done good business. Which when you look at that fight behind you, and for those of you just listening to the audio version of this show, you know, Train's got the legendary poster of Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran, one that took place in Montreal. And that fight deemed for there to be a rematch because it fit two criterias. Economically, it did big at the box office, and it was a close fight. Even though Roberto Duran won, this wasn't like a whitewash fight. This was a close fight, 15-round fight. Skip how many years are we now, right? Here we are with Crawford and Spence with these rematch clauses that you and I have always heard over the years, but it was never the idea that we knew about them going into these fights, and or were they ever exercised when they didn't make sense. And here we are. So let me get your take, man. This whole rematch clause or this whole fight, where do you see this legitimately taking place at like what time frame? And do you think it makes sense ultimately for this rematch to happen?
Well, first and foremost, it's definitely not taking place this year. You just gave me a date. Was it December 9th for
December 9th, yeah.
Haney and Regis programs? And, not that one has anything to do with the other, but dates are important when you're putting dates together. You don't want to overlap stuff, right? You want that to be a standalone situation. You just sent me a picture of Crawford. I just posted it. He actually put the post. Crawford put the post on Instagram. So I don't know where these reports come from. I don't know who's leaking them. What are people doing? And look, shout out to other boxing publications out there. Now, people doing with it the best that they can. But you got to be careful of, just uh, reposting or retweeting or recording, whatever you want to put out there of information that's just kind of hanging out there, because if you use your eyes and see Bud Crawford in the way he looks, do this look like a guy that's fighting at welterweight anytime soon again? Judging the way he looks? Or this
Right.
look like a guy bulking up to do something unique? Right. I mean, like, not that he's probably can't. I'm not saying he can't fight at welterweight, but Bud has, and maybe it was always there, and maybe he was handicapped when he was with Top Rank to do a lot of the stuff that he's doing now. And even myself, I'll be the first to admit, I question a lot of stuff that he was doing, but the guy is very strategic, and he's a strategist. The way he's putting everything together, leaking out information that he knows that's going to go out there and people going to run with it, playing mind games with the Spence camp and the fans out there, and then 2 days later he'll put up a post like, I'm around 160. What did he say? I'm around 160.
Around 180.
I'm my bad. He said I'm around 180. Like letting like I'm getting close. So when I hear people say he's going to fight Spence at welterweight, yeah, he may have said that, but that's like a kind of a low key way of saying like, well, we'll put that out there just to put it out there. I know that Spence he's not even a welterweight no more. He's listed on BoxRec as a junior middleweight. He's not even a welterweight no more. So that's not even like a realistic conversation. I just think that Bud is playing mind games with everybody. But you and I both know what his goal. Bud, he's a straight shooter. He was very adamant about what his goal was. He said, I want to be undisputed again. That's the goal. He'll honor the rematch, if it do come to that. But like I've been saying from the rip, just because a fighter exercises a rematch, don't believe it happens. That don't mean that it's going to happen. One other fact, and I'll give it back to you. There was a part of the clause where Spence, I think, was supposed to put something in about the weight. It was a deadline or what have you. He never did. He never exercised that. He never exercised it. So it's like,
Yeah.
well, that's not to saying that he doesn't want to fight Carvin. I think he do want to redeem his loss, but I just think that the fight right now don't make sense with a C. I just don't think it makes sense right now.
That's the perfect way to describe this.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense on 2K. Yeah. With the C and in the sense of how it culminated. all right, let me ask you this. How many rematches, immediate rematches, have you seen where the first fight was a complete domination?
The
I
only
mean, now
one
look, we did get Wilder Fury 3, right?
Wilder Fury, it was another one too. That I had this because I had to go back because you really got to go back to the '90s, early 2000s when you had these great matchups. We really didn't have a lot of this magnitude. So
Right.
I thought about Mosley and Forrest, right? And it's funny because I remember listening to the telecast. They tried to get not once but twice tried to get Shane out to take the fight with Vernon, even the first one. But they definitely
That's a
didn't
good
want him
point.
taking it. They didn't want him taking the rematch.
Yeah.
Now it wasn't on a level with this, but that was the only fight I can remember of high level that somebody got dominated and wanted to do the rematch right away.
Yeah. I think, and I put this in the
And
comments
Pavlik,
section.
well, that wasn't really a domination because Jermaine Teller just got caught
He
because he
dropped,
actually
yeah,
was winning the
he
fight.
dropped, right, yeah. I put this in the comments section on like the post this week, man. But I think really the elephant in the room is nobody's looking at Showtime or what Al Heyman has to say or what Steven Espinosa has already kind of like hinted. Like, listen, this fight did 650,000 buys on pay per view. It did 20 million at the gate.
Yes.
Those are solid numbers,
Yep.
but you got to remember, okay, the fight did culminate in one guy being dominated, stopped, beat up, whatever you want to call it. And now you, as Showtime, as Tom, TGB Promotions, Al Heyman, you guys have to sell, not us, not even the hardcore Terrence Crawford fans.
Right.
They're gonna watch anyway. You're really selling to the general mass audience that were the big pay-per-view buyers and the big ticket buyers. Now you gotta sell them on the notion like, hey, remember that first fight we sold you on? We're doing it again. Remember how it ended? We're doing it again, and guess what? We're gonna sell it for the same price. We're gonna sell it for the same pay-per-view, and come on in, man. Like, maybe we'll have a different outing. And and oh, by the way, you gotta pay Crawford and Spence. Somebody's gotta pay them.
Remember we said that though about the purses, like if they're not going to be able to pay them what they paid them going into this fight.
Ah, man, and that's how I think people are really losing sight of both Crawford and Spence walked away with 25, give or take $25 million from a fight that did 650K on pay-per-view. And they upsold the tickets to like, premium prices.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you can't, based on how the fight played out, that you can't resell that for the same price. Word of Fat Joe, like yesterday's
Yeah.
price ain't today's price, but like
Right.
to flip it the opposite way, like you can't sell this for the same price tag because
No,
the
really,
demand just isn't there anymore. Not from a general, sense, and it's why, to your point, you got to look between the lines, man, and sometimes just look through the cryptic messages. And there's a reason why Terrence Crawford's on Instagram going like this, showing him like looking, and he putting up these tweets. He's 180 pounds or whatever. It's giving you foresight of what ultimately what he wants. So I'm on the boat right now and saying that I feel whatever narrative they're gonna say, I just feel this fight is not gonna happen, man. And I could be wrong. Maybe they work it out. It's at 150 something catch, whatever. I just think it's a tough sell.
Yeah, I think that. Oh, you know what I thought about Tyson Holyfield too. Tyson Holyfield. What they
Yeah, but
did.
even the Tyson that the first fight was. I mean, it wasn't like Holyfield started taking over, but like even
Right.
like
It was. It
it was like, yeah, like you could say like it was it was an exciting fight, and I'll say this with Crawford
yeah.
Spence won. Even if Crawford was winning the rounds.
Mhm.
But it was exciting to the point where Crawford was like still getting hit with stuff. But man, it's like it was really more of a showcase than it was
Yeah.
a fight.
And but remember you and I talked about it almost felt like there was no contingency plan um,
Right,
from all the parties involved from the other
right,
side, not Bud side, but like Espinosa, Showtime, PBs, the whole nine. It was almost like, well, we got every scenario drawn out, in case this happened. But the one thing we didn't factor in was that a lopsided fight, from Crawford or Spence. Well, Crawford giving Spence the lopsided.
Crawford's
I
in.
think it would have been easier if it was the other way from their
Right.
perspective, because had Spence did what Crawford did, it's like, all right, well, look, we don't really need to see this again. We'll move on, and now we're talking about, and this is a perfect segue coming up. Now we're talking about Spence moving on to fight Canelo, which this is a really key component, and Canelo's a key piece to all this because remember it was Spence originally that was supposed to be Crawford, and then I want to fight Canelo next.
Days before the fight,
Yes,
days before the fight, they were
yes,
mentioning like, "Hey, man,
yes,
he could fight, Canelo in a couple fights." And I was sitting here like, "Yo, he's about to fight Terrence Crawford." Like,
yes. But it just go to show you how how one dominant like that scenario happening with Bud dominating this fight changed the trajectory of everything. You know what I'm saying?
right,
So now Bud is in a seat now where he like, all right, I can call all my own shots now. I don't have
yeah,
to chase you guys no more.
right.
You know what I'm saying? And I just think that like you, I'm on the same type time. Like until I see this fight signed again, I don't believe that is happening. I don't. And Espinosa don't believe it's happening. He came out his own mouth and was like, it's the fight that we're looking. What did he say? Potentially sometime next year.
Potentially down the
Yeah,
line, we got to revisit it, but
yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like,
people got to. Hey, listen, if money fell out of trees like that, and we can make any fight we want, and all these fighters can get paid all they want, like it'd be a wonderful world, right? But the reality is, it takes money to make these fights, and the fact that it took like 4 years for this to culminate, and now you want to run it back months later without there being a demand, and then the fighters are gonna want to get paid no less than the same.
and listen, there's only other options now. For Spence, it's tricky. I don't know what's the plan, what direction they want to go in with him. Obviously, like I said, he's a competitor. He's going to want this rematch. But the problem is that it's just so much stuff has changed. Like,
Yeah,
Like him wanting to fight Canelo, even Mel, because we still got to take Mel. It's a live dog in this. So if he wins, he said winner, no matter who it is, he wants to move up and be undisputed in that particular weight class. And you could see him
yeah.
bulking his body up, getting ready for whatever, 54, 60, 68, wherever the hell he plan on going. But not
I mean,
47 now. I looked at
no,
him. I said, he's not fighting that welterweight no
he's
more.
not. Yeah, I
Like,
honestly think Crawford's done at 147. I
yeah.
think he's done.
And
Um,
listen, and if he stay down there, he knows the public backlash. Like, all right, you staying down here, well, then fight Boo Simmons then. You know what I'm saying? So it's like,
yeah, right,
yeah.
right, and I think Crawford's at, like we've talked about, man. He's at a stage right now where he really has to take advantage of his position
Got it,
quick,
bro.
like uh, he doesn't have a long time. He's got maybe a year and a half or two. If he's gonna be 36, he's gonna be this month
He got a chance.
36.
He got a chance, right, to do something that well, Sugar Ray Leonard's probably the only one that actually probably did what he's about to do. Ray Robinson tried to fight at light heavyweight. Had to retire on his stool. Uh, Duran and all of that, but they was like older. These was like kind of gimmicky fights on the way out the door. this is a legitimate titles. Like this just don't happen in modern
This,
day boxing.
yeah, we talked about this offline where we brought up Roberto Duran, right?
Right.
We've seen Manny Pacquiao, we've seen all these hops and classes. This is what's different. And if Crawford is able to do this, okay, this isn't like him segueing like slowly to 168. And
Right.
again, this is if he decides to do this. He is going from welterweight to super middleweight, which is three
Yeah.
weight classes in one single bout. No fighter's ever done that.
No.
Not to my recollection. And then the fact that, like, and this is no shot to Roy, but you know, when Roy went to heavyweight, he got that strap, but he didn't necessarily
Yeah.
fight
It,
Klitschko
it
or one
wasn't
of those
like
guys.
wasn't like Michael Moore when he moved up and was fighting all the top
Right,
tier guys when he moved up to heavyweight,
right.
from
And
light heavyweight.
right, right. Terrence Crawford going up to super middleweight to fight the number one super
The best
middleweight
guy
in the
there.
world,
He's like,
undisputed.
yeah.
That's as big a jump as in my lifetime I've ever seen. And
Let me ask you a
historically,
question. I had a debate with somebody about this. What do you think is a bigger fight for Canelo? Benavidez or Bud?
see again, I monetarily, it's not even a question.
Right. That's
It's
what I said.
Terrence Crawford.
That's what I said. Like,
To to be fair, like,
mhm.
and it's like, we'll segue into Canelo
Yeah,
and Mel, but it's two different situations
yeah,
because
no
I
doubt.
it, okay, and I guess we'll get into this fight. All right, let me say this. I'll answer that question after I talk about this fight because then you'll get a better gauge of where I'm going as it concerns what maybe Mel can do against Canelo, or But real quick, and I'll throw it over to you. I never thought, or let me backtrack. We were going into this fight thinking Maul was going to be the opponent. We
I
were
could,
thinking, hey, we're being fed this,
right.
and that's obviously what we're seeing now. Where Maul he's with Roy, and it makes sense why Mel became the option. But it is kind of crazy what we're talking about with Crawford and moving up, and here we have Mel moving up two weight classes.
Yo, I just thought about something you just said. I forgot about that because that was the big thing that threw everything on. Because remember, originally
Oh yeah, yeah,
we
yeah.
thought it would be Maul, Canelo, Mel, Crawford. That's how we thought this would go down. That threw everything off once Maul backed out and Mel jumped in.
Well, yeah. I think we're now Crawford became. I mean, it's really. I think it's really two things, man. I mean, we've seen Maul kind of like trying to get back on his feet and get what we're thinking is, like, I guess, acclimated back to fighting. There's a rumor he may be on the undercard of this Benavidez Boo Boo fight.
Against
No,
Jose Benavidez, by the way.
right. Heavyweight Benavidez. So, I just think, yeah, man, I think Benavidez just naturally that's a tough fight. But actually, I'll get to him in a second. I think with Mel, you got the thing. The reason I'm not mad in one instance about this fight happening for him, at least, is because of the fact that he did what he did at junior middleweight. You know what I mean? He became undisputed. He
Yep.
took a loss, but like he never made that as like a detriment to his career. Like, where I wish more fighters were like that.
Yeah.
And look, man, at this stage of the game, him and Canelo and Maul, they're all the same age. They kind of came up
Weird.
together. Remember, they were all with Golden Boy at one point,
Yeah, it's weird how they all the
right?
same age.
And I
Technically.
just think, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Mel, for whatever it's worth, man, it's yeah, you know, he's somebody coming off a hand injury.
Yeah.
He's had a little bit of a layoff. Um, but look, the name of this game sometimes, man, is you take the opportunities when they're presented to you, and that's why even
You hear
Tim
that,
Zoo, who was
Tenzu? You hear that,
yo
Tenzu?
Tim Zoo even said, he goes, yo
Yeah, no,
man,
he
like
did. He walked it
he
back.
said
Well,
it.
definitely.
He
Yeah,
said
he
he's
walked
like,
it back.
bro, he's fighting Canelo Alvarez. What am I supposed to say? Like, so I think for Mel, does he have his work cut out for him? Of course, man. Like, listen, it is what it is. It's interesting. We've been seeing uh, one particular person in his corner who we came up seeing, like, maybe like almost 15 years ago, man, a fighter that really, there's certain guys through history that it was kind of what if, right? Joe Guzman, is in his corner, and you're getting a little bit of a gauge of what I think their MO is going to be for this fight. And it looks as if he's going to be on the move, be on the move, be on the move. Now, we've seen fighters try to do that for a lengthy period of time, and it can be taxing, man. That's for to do that for 12 rounds, man. You got to really be in solid condition. But what do you think? Or let me ask you, what do you think is Mel's best chance to win this fight? And or if you were to guide him as far as a strategy, like what would be the case to beat Canelo moving up 2 weight classes?
Well, you brought up something interesting, which is age, because I think Canelo is technically the older fighter. Now they're the same age. Actually, Canelo is 1 year younger. It's funny. He's 1 year younger than them, maybe by months. I forget, but he's technically younger, right? But he has a ROD always say, that Honda Civic got a lot of miles on it. It might be a newer car, but it got a lot of highway miles on it. And Canelo, he's been fighting since he was a kid. Remember he came to when we first learned about Canelo, he already had like 30 fights. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
he was fighting guys that we don't know who he was fighting. But once he, got put on the mainstream, he was fighting and fighting and fighting. You always brought up a good point, Roberto. You say he's the one star that we've seen in the last 20 years that never took a break. They all took breaks from Floyd to Pacquiao.
Floyd.
Rather it was through injuries or what have you, they all had breaks. Where Canelo, look, by the grace of God, he's never been really injured where he had to take off fights. He never did the whole fake retirement like so many other. You notice they don't do that no more. Remember when we kind of grew up? The Ray
Yeah, yeah,
Leonard started that, and Floyd and them, and De La Hoya and all did it, but he never did the fake retirement. He stayed the course. He moved up to 75, came back down to 68, lost the ball, and then came back down to 68 again and fought this guy, John Ryder, who he didn't look as great as in that. But look, I'll give him a mulligan. Maybe he fought down to his competition. But I think for Mel, you got to test the water with that. Is it real? Is his legs going? And the only way you're going to find out if a fighter legs is going, you got to work him. And see, I look at it like this, right? When we say movement, I think movement can go a lot of different ways. I look at the Castano fight, and he was able to push Castano forward, laterally, and backwards. That's how you work legs out, not just going on a straight line off the back foot. So I hope he's not training just like that. But the way Mel fight is, Mel got a very underrated jab, right? It's a touch range finding jab that he used to set up power shots. And if he's able to effectively, walk Canelo backwards, because that's the key word in this fight too, is that can he can he walk Canelo backwards? Because Canelo's not the same guy going backwards as he is forward. These are facts. Good as he is, good as he's become, working on getting better, he's still flawed in that regard. Where he's very limited when you got to make him go backwards, or you got to if you can work him laterally. He's not. He's
right.
just not the same guy, And it don't have to be a dominant lateral performance. Just subtle shift movements with footwork where he's constantly coming forward, and and look, Charlo, I'm not making him out to be James Tony. Look, Charlo's going to get touched in this fight. I think both guys are. But the key question is, like you said, can he keep Canelo up off? Because Canelo's going to press him. That's going to be his game plan. I'm gonna break him down systematically, walk him down, and hopefully to break his will because he's a smaller weight. And that's another thing, weight wise, right? I want people to understand something. Just because Charlo's bigger than him doesn't mean he's bigger than him. In
Right.
civilian street clothes, Charlo's the bigger guy. But in the boxing ring, his body is trained and conditioned to fight at certain weight classes. Canelo's been fighting at 168, for quite some time now. So his body is conditioned to take that type of punishment from bigger guys. Jermell hasn't been hit by a 68-pounder yet. We'll learn on Saturday, next Saturday, if he can, how much he can absorb to that. But like I said, the key is can you slow it down? It's going to be some tie-ups in here. I'm sure they worked on some clinches because you're going to have to tie Canelo up. Like, we saw in the Bivol fight, Bivol was tying him up, in spurts. Like, you got to tie Canelo because this stuff tires guys out. And the question is how much is Canelo legs? How much, or is that a real thing? Is he an older guy that's past his prime? And can Jermell exploit that? So it's a couple questions out there that we need answers to. We'll know, I think, very early on. I think kind of how this fight gonna play out. If Canelo is able to cut the ring off and Jermell constantly back footing on the line, then we're gonna have some problems. Jermell's gonna have some problems late in that fight. And if he's dictating the pace, got him backing up. If it go like in spurts, he's backing up, but he's backing Canelo up. Things may get interesting.
Yeah, I actually think he's. I mean, well, really, one thing I don't think he should put on that much weight. I think he should kind of stay. Yeah, Mel. Yeah, I think he should stay at the closest possible weight that he somewhat fights at. If he if he makes 154 and he's coming in like maybe 165 or 6.
Yeah.
Fight at your optimal weight where you're going to be comfortable at, and let alone if you're not having to cut that much weight. I just think he has, like you made a lot of points. I mean, and we've seen like there's really, I mean, to be honest with you, there's more than one way to beat Canelo Alvarez. We've seen different styles
different ways to do it. Yeah.
have their way with him, and so to speak. Now does Jermell possess? You mentioned the jab. I mean, I think that's key. The one thing Mel has that I don't think Canelo has seen in some time is speed.
Yeah,
and
another thing. Yeah,
it's something where there's times where Mel can be a sneaky counterpuncher. He could be a little bit of a sharpshooter at times, and even though there's times in the past where he kind of gets reckless, can't do that against Canelo Alvarez, who, mind you, he sets traps, and he'll bait. So Mel, he's got to be really careful for that. But he's just, I just think with Mel, he's in one of those positions, man, where he's got nothing to lose. He's being given this big opportunity, and it might, again, if this were Canelo from 160, I don't give Mel maybe somewhat of the chance I do in this fight, only because of the intangibles that I think are kind of there. Okay, like we can look at the Bivol fight. And then there's the Triple G fight where he didn't look that great either.
Right.
The John
Different
Ryder
styles,
fight.
right, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess my question is kind of like, are those trends for real? Or was he really harboring a hand injury and then we're going to see the Canelo of old
So wait,
Saturday night?
When you said his hand injury, because I saw a little bit of it, some people talking about it online. So is he saying that this went back to the Bivol fight? His hand injury?
All I'm hearing about is the John Ryder fight, but I did hear something about like he hasn't been 100%. But again, we've been down this road before, like because we've seen other fighters harbor injuries, but
They all hurting.
Listen,
Some
man,
people,
Floyd had fought with brittle hands for like damn near half his career.
yeah, Ward. Remember that? Remember Ward talking
Ward,
about?
yeah.
Yeah, man.
So I
Bad
don't
mate.
know, man. We bring up the points that you brought it up again with Canelo's. He's 33, but he's got a lot of mileage. You know, at some point or another, that is going to come to the table a lot more clear than maybe what is on the table right now. Now, can this fight, and this is where I'm like kind of stuck like how I view this fight happening, because I mean, for the record, I got Canelo winning this fight, but I'm not sure yet if it's going to be a situation where we go in and it's
Oh,
Canelo's got this big advantage, and then
yeah.
the end of the fight comes around and we're like, whoa. So I'm hoping obviously we get that kind of fight, but there's just a lot of intangibles really for both going in that it's tough for me. Like again, I'm picking Canelo, but I'm not writing Mel off. Like if that makes any sense.
You know, it's funny, right? There's some contradictories going on here because, like, Canelo said that, oh, well, what would I get out of fighting? At first, he said this about Bud. He's
I
a
know where you're
smaller
going.
guy, but you fighting a smaller guy. Look,
You're right.
listen. No matter which
Right.
one he picked, it was it was a handicap situation. Jermell ain't fighting 2 years.
Yeah.
Jamal is fighting at 154 and he moved up. Look, people can say, well, it's two and not. Look, two, three, four. He's still moving up
Still, yeah.
multiple weight classes. What's
Right. Both of them. Either
so,
or.
so if it's Bud that, so, but I just thought that was interesting. But anyway, so this is the one thing about this fight that makes this interesting. Like you said, Jamel's playing with house money, bro. Like, he has nothing to lose out of this. He is a
Not at
built-in.
all.
When you're going into a fight with a built-in excuse, you have nothing to lose, right? So where Canelo, on the other hand, there's a huge risk factor here because two things. If he wins, most people will say, well, you know what? You're supposed to be. He'll be a smaller guy. Go fight somebody your own size. Go fight Benavidez, right? But if he loses, let me set the table. What I was wanted to say. This is a kind of a legacy fight on the way out the door for Canelo, where
Yeah.
if he loses, and especially it depends on how he loses, right? But if it's a situation where it's like a De La Hoya and Pacquiao, where Charlo just beat him, that was a good point you brought up about being first. And I'll add to that. I think Charlo got to be first and last. You know, because punching in between punches it's dangerous when you fight Canelo because he's a great counter puncher. But if you able to beat him 2 punches, and all right, if you get a shot off here and there, and you punctuate it with your last shot, then I think that's another way that Charlo will have some success. But if it's a situation where Charlo like outclasses him, oh boy. So now, and listen, and you know how it works, Roberto. Fair, unfair, and Crawford team came out and said the same thing. Like, look, when you kind of peel back the onion, shout out to ROD, that's his famous go-to line. When you peel back the onion, and with Canelo's career, when he's been in these big spots and big moments, we always scratching our head the next morning. So to me, he has to have a solid performance.
Yeah.
I think, me personally, but
I
I
agree.
think
No,
he has to have a solid performance.
we brought up that
Small or
point.
not.
Right. We
Yes.
brought up that point. Like when you think about like the big names he's fought. Again, maybe outside of like an old. All right, let me. Your contemporaries, right? Now, whatever you consider Triple G at 36 years old, I mean,
Which was,
but I agree. Like, there's always been kind of he's had a lot of question mark fights, and
and these big
it's
fights.
why
Yeah.
I posed the question. Mel can be potentially, based on his circumstances, and again, man, he's got way more to gain than he does to lose.
Nothing
Which
lose. Yeah.
doesn't mean he should not fight a
Not
smart
getting blood
fight, but
away. We're saying like he can always be like, I can't make this weight. I'm going back to where I came from. Like,
yeah, yeah. Right,
So
right, right.
no,
So
man. I just think that, like, for me, it's a matter of, you know, how much can Jermell impose to keep Canelo off of him. And like I said, is, make an old man work. Use his legs with constant motion and movement and hand speed. Skills in there as well. But Canelo ain't see this in a minute. This combination of a fighter.
I think one of the strategies really should be to attack Canelo's body. I mean, I think that's one
Which
area that
I'm
nobody
glad you
goes to.
brought that up. Mel is a really, really good body puncher. The Tony Harrison fight, even in the Castano fight, the Tony Harrison fight, and me and you, we talked about this several off camera. Before the knockout happened, he catches Tony Harrison with a vicious body shot. And Tony Harrison low key didn't recover from that. He hit it fine, and the headshot was just, the icing on the cake. But
Yeah,
the body shot is what slowed him down. Even the
yeah,
commentary, they missed it that night when they was covering that fight. But he go to the body really well. He mixes his blood. Bell's a good fighter, man. That's why I like, this is it. At first, when it first happened, I was like, oh man, this is some BS. Like, I just wasn't feeling it. But then I was like, as time went on, I started like processing everything in my mind. I'm like, you know what, this fight is actually gonna be interesting, while it lasts, if it lasts, but I just think that it's gonna be some intriguing moments in this fight.
yo, I have a strange feeling. This joint's going 12, man. I have a weird
Yeah,
feeling.
yeah, oh, yeah, I think so. I think Mel got a chin. I don't think Canelo's stopping him. I think Mel should now. I think he got dropped early in his career, if I'm not mistaken. But I think that guy's in tip top shape. I don't think he's just going to be on a straight line to be had all night.
The
The
thing
only way
with
I can see,
Canelo,
what you say, bro?
no, go ahead.
No, I said only way I can see Mel getting stopped. Is what we were saying is that, look, I'm doing everything I can, and I just can't keep this dude off me. And you constantly backpedaling it and get caught with something over the top from constant wear and tear, So that's the only way I can see him potentially getting stopped. But I just think that he's a rugged. I think Mel is rugged, man. I think that he's athletic. He's got boxing abilities. And I just think, if it needs to get rugged, he can get rugged in there too. And I just think that he's conditioned to deal with things that a lot of other guys wasn't. Even as a smaller guy moving up, I think he's going to be able to be conditioned to deal with some stuff that other guys wasn't.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I think we're what Mel brings to the table that I don't think Canelo's used to seeing really at this you know I mean again it's subjective with the weight because it's Mel moving up. But like
Yeah,
when you take somebody like Triple G, who Canelo could see those punches come a mile away, still
yeah,
got hit with them, but you can kind of see
that's
them.
the crazy
Where I
part.
think Mel has the opportunity where like I don't think Canelo's gonna sit there and want to try to test Mel's power, but I think Mel, like to your point, he could set his punches up in a way where Canelo may not see those punches, and I think that's where he has to kind of make Canelo think twice if
Yeah,
these shots are coming in, particularly like in the exchange. And Canelo's like, whoa, because I think where Bivol had success was he was punching in the exchange, but for every two shots that Canelo landed, Bivol came back with like two or three, and Canelo didn't like that
the one
because he
thing
got
though,
that, and he had him laying on the ropes after a while. That got him tired.
Bivol though consistently did out that fight was civilize you with a jab. That's why I'm saying like Canelo don't like he don't
He
like
don't.
nothing in his face or pause, but he don't like nothing in his face all night. That's the one thing that gave him. If you go back to look at everybody that gave him problems, it's one consistent punch that gave him problems from all the way back to the Lawler fight. That was the one. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like it frustrates him, and what happens when he's civilized with a jab, he gets impatient and he resorts back to his old
right,
habit of just
right,
following you around
right,
with
right.
no rhyme or reason. Let's not forget in the Caleb Plant fight early on in that fight, he was now his goal in that fight was I'm gonna just deal with this until I can't deal with it no more. I'm gonna break Caleb down late, but again, like you said, uh, Mel, I think condition wise, is a little bit more well, and he's more seasoned. Like that was Caleb Plant, and not to make excuses, but you know what I'm saying. Like Mel have been in world,
Right.
he have been around.
Yeah, no, you're right. Experience takes you a long way. And
Yeah.
again, like even Mel moving up 2 weight classes, you could argue he's still the puncher over Caleb Plant.
Right.
Is it
Right.
concerns like, you know what I'm saying? Like when you're a puncher, you like almost every like look historically at every single puncher in boxing and that moved up in weight, they carried much of their punches of the weight classes. You know, I mean, there
Yeah.
was a point where it was, but a puncher's a puncher, and I don't think Canelo can fight Caleb Plant. I mean, can fight Mel in the same manner as Caleb Plant, who I don't think he ever
Right.
worried about what was coming at him because he was fighting at like in a defensive stance, like practically on the back foot the whole night.
Let me
This, and
say
to
this
your
though,
point,
real quick, before we close out. If Mel wins this fight, this is going to change modern day boxing, and I'm gonna say that. I'm gonna say that because it's going to open eyes up for other fighters. Like, hmm. And this goes for the Inoues of the world, the Javante. Well, Javante kind of. Well, that's a whole other story, Javante. But yeah, but for all other guys, you know what I'm saying. But I think it's going to change this version of. We've seen this before, so for us, this is just just how it's always been. But I think it's going to open guys' eyes up. Like, but damn, I got the skill set. I'm technically a bigger dude. Like, let me try my hand with some stuff. Like, let me move up some, a weight class or two and try my hand. So I do think that if he wins, it's going to change something. Now, here's before we wrap up too. What we didn't factor in is that what if this fight is like kind of close where they got to run it back and do a rematch? I forgot about
which
that.
is probably
Yeah,
what they would do. You know,
yeah,
it's now I'll tell you, and I think all of us kind of would agree with this that there's probably going to be one particular person in the crowd in Vegas that night. You know, maybe rocking a tank top or whatever.
yeah,
I
yeah.
really feel
You think you,
Terrence
you
Crawford is going
think
to be at this fight.
you think you pulling up?
I think he pulls up. I
Yeah,
really think he pulls up,
inside the
only
ring
to
or
make more of the
just
case.
inside the ring, or you think he just
But that's what I'm saying. Like, we came
depends?
from the era, not even that
Yeah,
far removed. Remember when Shane went in
yeah,
against Floyd and
yeah,
that all started and B Hop
yeah.
was in his face? You need to take this fight. We need that, man. Like, it ain't like Crawford's going to go in there and swing at Canelo. That's not the case, but this is the part of boxing that gets missed sometimes, where
It does.
the
It
marketing
does.
side of it,
The mark,
a
yep.
lot of it back then, man, these fighters were like this, like come on, let's fight it. It
I
set
think
the tone.
Crawford. I think Bud is low key rooting, and as he should, because Canelo's the bigger fight. I think he low key pulling for Canelo, and from a legacy standpoint, like it's like don't get me wrong. If he was to fight Mel, it'd be a great fight, and don't get me wrong, but you know what I'm saying. Like top pound for pound guy, in the last X amount of years, moving up a weight. It's a lot more sexier to beat Canelo than it is Jermell, given the circumstances of the situation.
Canelo versus Terrence Crawford would be the biggest pay-per-view Pacquiao Mayweather
Yeah,
as
I
it
agree.
concerns boxing.
I agree. And that's what I was trying to explain to somebody earlier. He's like, well, it's a Mexican versus Mexican. I say, Benavidez, don't get me wrong. He's not there yet. It's still got to be. It's just not about a Mexican fighter. And before somebody bring up Ryan Garcia has 15 million followers on Instagram. He's in Milan right now modeling
He's
designer
in
wear.
Europe
You know
right
what I
now,
mean?
man.
Yeah, he's somewhere. So it's not the and look, Benavidez, I do think is the next. He will be the next big pay per view star, at some point. But I just think, given the momentum, because that's the key word
Yeah,
here, momentum of Bud Crawford. Look, the guy was on Good Morning America, for crying out loud. He's made every media run that you could think of, and he's hot. He's a hot. That's why. Why do you think Canelo changes his tune? He
tune.
see
He
what me and you
knows.
see. He like, oh shoot, well, maybe we kind of misjudged his net worth. So, but first thing first, let's get this over with, and
Yeah.
we'll go from there. So Yeah.
But that's pretty much it, man. Follow us, as we always say, Instagram
Yo,
at Guards
hey,
Grow Boxing.
hold on real quick, right? This poster, right? It says live on closed circuit TV, no radio and no home TV. That's crazy, right?
You had to be
Imagine that.
out to watch it.
You had to. That's the only. I remember my pop was like, I forget what fight it was. One of the fights. Matter of fact, it was the Aaron Pryor and Alexa Guerrero fight, and he was saying that he had to go through so much. He had to ride somewhere way out, like Bethlehem, PA, to go watch this fight on a closed circuit because it was sold out in the
At the
wherever they
or
was
at,
playing
yo
that in
at
Philly.
the legendary Orange Bowl. Rest in
Yeah,
peace,
right.
man.
It was there, but just think though, bro. Back then, you couldn't
Yeah,
watch it at the crib. You had to go somewhere. He said the fight was so popular today, they was sold out. He had to go ride. Wait, it wasn't no Google, and I'm like, damn. Well, how did y'all know what? You know what I mean? Like, it's
yeah,
like this
man.
word of mouth. They would be like, oh, the such and such is playing it at the Armory way there. You know, crazy, bro.
These kids today got it good, man. Like I saw Leonard Hagler close circuit on a Monday night. Like I went with
Yeah,
my uncle and my
right.
dad, and like we just saw it, man. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So it's like
Different day and time, bro.
absolutely, man. So like
All
we
right,
said,
bro.
at Guard Your Girl Boxing on Instagram, Facebook.com/GYG Boxing. Appreciate all the follows. Comment. Let us know who you got winning this fight, man. Canelo,
Yeah.
Jermell,
What is your
Charlo.
prediction?
Yes. So we are out till next time. Peace.